Hi there, and welcome to week 5 of Holy Yoga for When You're a Hot Mess. I am so glad you're tuning in today because this video is my favorite one of this whole series. What God has spoken to me about this class has just changed my perspective on everything. So we've talked about over these previous 4 weeks about the importance of connecting with our hearts and connecting our hearts with God, about digging a deep foundation and letting God in deep, deep down, about how we can do that because we are known by a God who knows us and loves us before we even knew Him. And then in light of all that, last week we talked about Martha and looked at her story and examined it in light of our lives and said, okay, God, how can we peel back the layers? Where can we stop the hustle and just be with you? This week we're going to revisit the story of Martha, but we're going to bring in Lazarus, her brother, and Mary, her sister, and look at Jesus' work in resurrecting Lazarus. And the theme here this week is death to life, and sometimes before resurrection comes, there has to be death. So let's pick up the story in John chapter 11. We're going to start right in verse 1 and skip around a little bit. So here we go. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then, after this, he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews you were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going to go there again? Let's jump ahead to verse 17. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Let's skip down to verse 28, because it just talks about Jesus' encounter with Martha there, and we talked about that last week. So verse 28 says this. When Martha had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, The teacher is here and calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to go to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. The Jews said, See how he loved him? But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. And Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to him, Unbind him and let him go. Let's jump in and do some yoga. Let's start in just a comfortable seated position. Eyes closed, palms open towards heaven. Draw your chin down and your ears over your shoulders, lengthening your spine, sitting up straight, knitting your ribs in. And then draw your attention to your breath. As you inhale, feel it roll up your body. Feel how it fills up every cell, and then as you exhale, feel it roll right back down. Notice how you can feel its presence in your body if you just pay attention to it. There's a few things I want us to notice in this story about Lazarus. The first is that the Bible says that Jesus loved Lazarus. It specifically says that. And friends, there are very few instances I could find in the Bible where it says that specifically Jesus loved this person. You don't see that about his disciples, about his family, but it specifically says that about Lazarus. Jesus loved this man, and he let him die. Jesus had the power to go to him when he was sick and heal him before he died, but he didn't. He let him die. Why would he do that? Because he was confident of God's character. He was confident of God in him, right? Like the Bible story says that Jesus allowed this so that the glory of God could be revealed. And what that means is that Jesus doesn't rejoice in death, that God doesn't find delight in sickness and in brokenness and things dying. No, the Bible says that Jesus came to bring life and life more abundantly because he rejoices in bringing what was dead back to life. But before the resurrection, there's this death. And what I've been thinking about so much lately is ideas about myself or dreams that I had for my life or ways that I thought about things. Sometimes those have to die before something new can be birthed. Maybe that old dream is resurrected one day, or maybe it's resurrected in a different way that I can't even fathom right now. But sometimes things have to die first. Whatever position you're in, I want you to make your way to child's pose. Knees together or apart, hips sinking back, arms stretched out long in front of you. And then let's open up our shoulders a bit here. Take that right arm and thread it underneath your left arm, rolling over onto your right shoulder here. You can take those left fingertips and crawl them over to the right corner of your mat. You can even open up your hips here if you want to, if you need to find some more depth to feel that stretch. Continuing to breathe fully, deeply, inhaling and exhaling, even as you stretch here. The second thing I want us to notice is that Jesus grieved Lazarus' death. He didn't just say like, oh yeah, let him die. I'll come back and get him later. No, the Bible says that he came, he talked to Martha, and then he visited the tomb and he wept. Now, why would Jesus weep when he knew that resurrection life was inside of him? Right? Like if he's God and he knows all things, he knows that Lazarus isn't dead. He's going to raise him back from the dead. But he still grieves. I think that's such a human thing of Jesus to do. It reminds us that he was fully God, but also fully man, that he can feel grief, the loss of something and someone that he loved deeply. So like come back to center and just switch sides. So stretch that left arm underneath your right, rolling over onto that left shoulder blade. Moving your right arm over to the left side of your body, or maybe opening up that right hip to make more space. Jesus's grief in this story, I think, gives us a permission to grieve as well. Grieving is not wrong. It's not an admission of failure or guilt or even a lack of faith. And I think sometimes we think that faith means muscling up, putting a smile on and just declaring the good things of God, right? Declaring that God works all things together for good, that God is the power of resurrection life and that's in us. And that's not all bad. But that's not what Jesus did in this moment. Jesus took this opportunity to grieve. And if we don't give ourselves the freedom and the permission to mourn the loss of someone or something that we loved, I think that we miss out on a real intimacy with Jesus. We miss out on healing. We miss out on the ability to truly know what it's like to mourn with others when they mourn. So let's think on these two things as we move through the first part of our practice here today. Is there something in your life that you've seen die? And what comes up when you think about that? Something maybe that you haven't grieved, or something that's died and you feel maybe angry or bitter or frustrated with God about it or confused. Can you just bring that into your practice today? And maybe use this time to grieve it in a way that you haven't done before. Slowly come back to center. Reach both hands out in front of you. Press your palms into the mat. Straighten those arms, hugging muscle to bone here as you externally rotate your upper arms here. Plugging your shoulders back. Begin to tuck your toes, lift your hips, and begin to pedal your heels out one at a time as you stretch back into this first downward facing dog of our practice. We're going to begin to build some heat. So as we move through these first few series of flows, I'm gonna cue like we're doing a vinyasa style flow. So chaturanga, upward facing dog, downward facing dog. But if that's not something you feel like is something you want to do today, then skip them. If you get tired, if you feel frustrated, skip them. If you want a new challenge, you want to try them, please do, but don't feel the pressure to do exactly what I do. This is your practice. The purpose of this practice is not to look a certain way, but to serve your body and worship God the way that you are called to in this moment. All right. Look towards your hands. Begin to walk your feet up to meet them and hang here in forward fold. We're going to root our feet down to rise all the way up to standing, sweeping our arms up over our head, bringing our palms to touch, drawing them down to our hearts. With a big inhale, reach overhead, and an exhale, fold all the way back down to your mat. On an inhale, lift halfway up, stretching your heart forward. Exhale, fold. Press your palms into the mat. Step back to plank pose here. Taking this moment to really tighten up your core, not squeezing your butt muscles together, but drawing up through your inner thighs. Finding a flatness across your back here. Good. Hugging your elbows into your ribs, lower halfway down. Untuck your toes with a big inhale. Sweep your heart up into the first upward facing dog of the day. Exhale, press the mat away from you. Lift your hips. Come back to downward facing dog. Pedal your heels out here. Breathe as you move. Look towards your hands. Walk your feet up to meet them. Hang in forward fold. With a big inhale, root down, rise all the way up, reaching those fingertips long up to heaven. Exhale, draw them to your heart. Inhale, sweep them up overhead, and then as you exhale, fold forward, letting all that breath go. On an inhale, lift halfway up, finding length. Exhale, fold. Place your hands on the mat, step back to plank pose. Hug those elbows into your ribs, and with a big exhale, reach forward and lower halfway down. Untuck those toes. Inhale to upward facing dog. Reach that heart forward. Press the tops of your feet into the mat. Exhale, press your palms into the mat. Press back to downward facing dog. Breathing and moving here. Inhale, sweep your right leg up and long behind you. Reaching those toes back, finding length, opening across that right hip. Beautiful. And then come forward, reach forward, hug that knee into your chest, and then step your foot down between your hands. Lower your left knee onto the mat. Sink into your low lunge on the right side. We're just going to be here for one big inhale here. Exhale. Good. Tuck those left toes and lift that left knee up off the mat, rising up into a high lunge here. Good. Find your balance. Really press that right knee energetically out so that you can see that right big toe. That back leg does not have to be straight. You can bend it so that you can help reach that tailbone down to the earth. So we're not sticking our tailbone out here and arching our low back, but think about reaching it down to the earth. Good. Breathing here. I want you to really think about pressing all 4 corners of that front right foot into the mat. Using the strength of your core, I want you to begin to reach your heart forward. Nothing in your low body changes, but you're just reaching that heart forward, bringing your upper body as close to parallel with the mat as you can. So your core is hovering over that right thigh. Good. I want you to draw your hands to your heart. You can stay here if this is a good challenge for you. If you want to take it deeper, nothing changing on the bottom, begin to slowly twist your upper body over to the right side, maybe hooking that left elbow over the outside edge of that right knee. Breathing here. Good. If you're twisting, come back to center. Everyone place your hands down on the mat. Step your right foot back to meet your left. Inhale in plank pose. Exhale, come forward, lower halfway down to chaturanga. Inhale, untuck your toes, reach your heart forward, bending back ever so gently. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, stretch your left leg back, reaching those toes like you were going to stamp them on the wall behind you. And then hug it into your chest, come forward, and step that foot down between your hands. Good. Lower your right knee down to the mat, and with big, deep breaths, sink forward into this low lunge here. Enjoying this stretch. Breathing into the new space. All right, let's tuck that right toe underneath us. Begin to lift that right knee up off the mat, and using the strength of your core, rooting down, rising up into your high lunge here. Once again, bending that back knee if you need to so that your hips can be parallel to the front edge of your mat. Your hip points are shining forward. They're not pointing down to the mat. So if you notice that your hips are dumping forward, that might be a good hint to bend that back knee so that you can straighten them. Reach your tailbone down to the mat. Good. Breathing into this high lunge. Nothing changing on your bottom half. Begin to reach your heart forward. Lengthen it down towards the mat so that your torso is hovering over that left thigh. Breathing here. Drawing your hands to your heart. If you're ready for a twist, changing nothing on the bottom, begin to rotate your upper spine over to the left side, maybe even hooking that right elbow on the outside edge of that left thigh. Really press that left thigh into your right elbow. Beautiful. Breathing. And then returning to center. Everybody, let's place our hands down on the mat. Step your left foot back to meet your right. With a big inhale in your plank pose here. Exhale, lower halfway down. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, press back to downward facing dog. Taking this time to reconnect with your breath. Reconnect with your intention at the beginning of today's class. Sweep your right leg back once again. This time, let's bend our right knee and just open that right hip up, stacking it on top of our left hip, not twisting our upper body, so our upper body stays pointing to the front edge of the mat, but our lower body this time is twisting open as we stretch our hip here. Good. Return it back. Hug that knee into your chest, coming forward, then place it down on the mat. Spiral your back foot to about 45 degrees. Your heels line up. With a big inhale, rise to your warrior one. Hips are pointing to the front edge of the mat. We're bending in that front knee to try and make a 90-degree angle, but being careful not to let that knee stick too far out over our front ankle. If it is, then we need to widen our stance. Good. Press into the back edge of that left foot. Heart facing forward here. Good. Return your hands to the mat. Step your right foot back to meet your left. Go through a flow if you like, or just press straight back to downward facing dog. Look to your hands. Step your feet up to meet them. Hang in forward fold. With a big inhale, root down, rise all the way up. Exhale, hands to your heart. Inhale, sweep your arms up overhead. Exhale, sink your hips back. Come to sit in chair pose here. Really pressing down through your heels here. Sinking your hips back like you're going to sit in a chair. Once again, not letting that Those hip points point forward down towards the mat, but we're drawing our tailbone down, not arching our low back here, but finding length through our spine, even as we sit back in our chair. Good, and just like we did in our high lunge, drawing your hands to your heart, nothing changing on the bottom. Begin to reach your heart forward. Good, and then at the big inhale here, exhale, let's twist over to the right side, seeing if you can maybe touch the outside edge of that upper left arm to the outside edge of that right thigh. Breathing as you twist in your chair pose here. Our hips stay square though, so don't let that right hip stick out forward, but anchor your right thigh bone back into your right hip. Good, exhale, return to center. Inhale in your chair one more time and exhale, straighten your legs, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold. Place your hands on the mat. Step back to plank pose. One more time, lower halfway to chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Good. With a big inhale, reach your left foot back. Bending that left knee, opening that left hip and stacking it on our right hip. But root down through that left hand and keep that left shoulder parallel to the front edge of your mat. Return to center. Come forward, hugging your left knee into your chest, and then place it down on your mat. Spiral your right foot to 45 degrees, lining up front heel with your back heel. And bend into that front knee, coming into your warrior one. Hips are square to the front. Energetically rooting down through all four corners of our feet. Feeling that lift in the back, in the inner thigh of our right leg. Good. Return your hands to the mat. Step your left foot back to meet your right. Lower halfway down with an exhale. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Look to your hands. Step or walk your feet up to meet them. Hang in forward fold. Root down, rise all the way up to standing, reaching your hands up to heaven. Exhale, hands to your heart. Inhale, arms overhead. Exhale, sink back into your chair. Really pressing the weight through your heels here. Energetically hugging your thighs together. Breathing in the fire. Drawing your hands to your heart, let's begin to reach our heart forward. Our chair pose on the bottom stays exactly the same. And at the big exhale, let's twist over to the left side, hooking our right arm to the outside edge of that left thigh. If it reaches, if it doesn't, that's all right. You can still twist. The benefits are the same. Don't forget your breath, even when it's hard. Good. Return to center. Take a big inhale here and then exhale, folding forward, straightening your legs. Good. Press your palms into the mat. Step your feet back and let's all just press back to downward facing dog. Come down to your knees. Surrender here in child's pose. What have you been muscling through? What have you been putting a smile on and just saying, God's got it? But that thing is still crying out to you for attention, to grieve it the way it needs to be grieved, to just enjoy intimacy with Jesus. Let Him carry that grief with you. Let Him comfort you. Let Him remind you that He brings life. But before there can be rebirth, there has to be death. Press your palms into the mat, tuck your toes, and let's stretch back to downward facing dog. Step or walk your feet forward, hanging in forward fold. Place your right hand down on the mat, bend your right knee, and let's just twist open to the left side gently here, taking your left hand to your hip or stretching it out long behind you. Breathing gently into this twist. Returning back to center, left hand on the mat, bending that left knee, sending that right hand to our hip or to the sky as we twist open to the right side. Enjoying that stretch through our hips, but also the twist in our upper spine. Good. Return back to center. I want you to begin to root down really seriously through that right foot. We're going to come to Warrior 3 pose. What that looks like is that left leg is going to reach long behind you. Your hands can stay on the mat here as you begin to reach that left leg behind you. Or you can begin to, one at a time, draw your hands to your heart, to your hips, or even reach them out long in front of you. Stretching them out longer makes it harder, right? Because your center of balance is longer, right? There's more space for your body to have to hold the weight of, rather than when it's close together at your heart. But find that place, that edge of ability and challenge, and breathe into it. Send your gaze a few inches in front of you, finding a place to focus on. Good, and then rooting down through that right foot, begin to make your way up to a standing position, but hug that left knee into your chest as you do so, continuing to balance and work the strength of our right leg. Good, you can either keep your knee here, or if you know that you've got a little bit more space in your hamstring and your calf on the left side, you can begin to stretch that left leg out, grabbing onto your big toe, coming into extended hand to big toe pose here. So whether you're holding onto your knee or your foot, you're pressing that body part into your hand to help you find balance and stability. Engaging through your leg as you press it out in front of you, but hugging that shoulder, that left shoulder back into your back so it's not rounding forward. Good, and then I want you to reach out with your right hand, either to your knee or the outside edge of that left foot, and begin to twist open to the left side. So that left foot or knee still presses forward, but your upper body now is twisting over to the left side. Stretch that left arm long behind you and send your gaze over your fingertips. Breathing here as you do. Good, slowly come back to center, but don't release that leg yet. Fold forward, come into standing splits here. So reach that left leg as far back and as far up to the sky as you can. Let your head and neck hang loose here. To play with your balance, you can begin to walk your hands closer to that right standing leg. Maybe one of them holds on to that right calf. Maybe you wrap both of them around. Being willing to play and have fun and take a risk, and being willing to take a break when you need it. Good. All right, let's release that left leg and just hang here in forward fold. Press your hands into the mat. Step back to plank pose. With a big inhale here, gather your strength in your core. Hug your elbows into your ribs, and as you exhale, lower halfway down. Inhale to upward facing dog. Exhale, press back to downward facing dog. Look to your hands. Step or walk your feet up to meet them, returning to our forward fold. Let's do the same set of poses on the right side now. So rooting down through that right foot, begin to draw your attention to the sequence that we just did, right? Begin to mentally prepare yourself for this right side. You can do this. The Comforter, your friend Jesus, is here with you. Don't miss out on his presence, even when things are hard. Rooting down through that left foot, begin to reach your right toes up off the mat, stretching that right leg long behind you, maybe coming up onto your fingertips or reaching your hands up to your heart. Finding equanimity across your hips. Your hips are parallel to the mat. Your right hip isn't sticking up or over, but they're parallel to the mat. Beautiful. Breathing in here as you balance. Slowly begin to make your way up to a standing position and hug that right knee into your chest here. And then either grabbing onto that knee or reaching your foot out and grabbing onto the big toe of that foot. Let's stand here in extended hand to toe or hand to knee pose. Drawing the right shoulder and the right hip back. Beautiful. Can you grow taller here as you balance? Can you maintain stability as you reach out with your left hand and grab the outside edge of that right foot or that right knee and stretch that right arm behind you into a twist? Nothing on the bottom changes, but everything on the top changes. Where is your foundation when everything on the top changes? Is it rooted? Does it stay the same? Does it have staying power? Slowly return to center. Begin to fold forward and reach that right foot out behind you and up to the sky as you come to your standing splits. Maybe crawling your fingertips closer and closer to that standing left foot. Maybe they even come off the mat just a little bit. If they don't, that's okay. You're getting stronger just by balancing here. Return that right foot to the mat, and let's just hang here in forward fold. Place your hands on the mat. Step back to plank pose. Lower your knees down to the mat, and let's sink down into child's pose. There are a couple more points I want to find in this story. The first is that people will question you and the power of God in your life when you mourn, and that's okay. We see in verses 35 through 38, some people in the story saying, well, if this really is the Son of God, why didn't he come when he was sick? Why didn't he send his angels to heal him? These people are questioning the power of God. They're looking at Jesus and saying, oh, he's not really who he is, because if he was, this wouldn't have happened. Jesus knew they were there, and yet he still publicly came out and grieved. So if grieving something that you've lost leads to people questioning you, your faith, the power of God in your life, take comfort in the fact that that's not the first time in history that that's happened. That you and Jesus have walked through similar experiences. Slowly come back up to center. Come to sit up on your knees, swing your feet out to the side, and just make your way down to a reclined position. Bring your feet onto the soles of your feet onto your mat. Your heels close to your hips here, so that if you reached out with your fingertips, you could graze the back of your heels with them. We're going to come to a series of bridge and wheel poses. So take this gently. Listen to your body. I'll cue a bridge pose first, and then I'll cue 2 wheel poses. But you can certainly take whatever you want for as long as you want. So with a big inhale, root your feet down into the mat. Press your shoulders and the back of your head into the mat as you lift your hips up to the ceiling. Energetically spiraling your thighs inward like you were squeezing a block between your thighs. You're not squeezing your butt cheeks here, but you're using the strength of your core to find stability. Good. Press your hips up 1 more inch. And then on an exhale, 1 vertebrae at a time, lower down to the mat. Once again, you can take bridge pose again. If you'd like to take wheel pose, take your hands, fingertips facing your feet, press them next to your ears. Be really conscious of hugging those elbows in, not letting them splay out to the side, but hugging them in. Pressing your hands and your feet into your mat. Begin to lift those hips up off the mat, coming up to the crown of your head. Very gently here, not dumping weight onto the back of your head and your neck. And as you're ready, begin to straighten your arms, reaching those hips higher. Breathing into this space. Think about hugging that block between your thighs. Good. With a long, slow exhale, gently come down one vertebrae at a time. Let's take this one more time. Pressing your feet if you're in bridge, or your hands and feet if you're in wheel, into the mat. Slowly begin to press that body weight in as you lift your hips, lift your heart, lift your head gently up off the mat, pressing into the mat with your feet and your hands. Good. Breathing into that open space across your heart. Drawing those shoulders away from your ears as you reach your heart forward. Pressing those knees forward and those thighs back. Good, and then slowly, one vertebrae at a time, lower all the way back down to the mat. Hug your knees into your chest here and just gently rock from side to side, massaging your lower spine. Hugging your left knee into your chest, stretch your right leg long out in front of you. And then gently twist that left leg over to the right side. Reaching your left arm out and sending your gaze over it as you gently twist your low back here. The final thing I want to point out to you in this passage is a verse at the very beginning of it, where Jesus says he's going to go back after they had word that Lazarus was sick. After a few days, he decides to go back. But in order to get back to Bethany, where Lazarus died, they had to go through the city where just days prior, the people there had wanted to stone him. The disciples said, "A short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" The truth here is this, that sometimes to get to resurrection life, you have to go back through a war zone. It's not always rainbows and butterflies in this process of healing. Sometimes you have to walk right back through the place that tried to kill you in the first place. Come back to center, hug both knees in, and then stretch your left leg long, twisting your right knee over to the left side, sending your gaze over your right fingertips. Good. Slowly come back to center. Hug both knees into your chest, and then just with a big exhale, stretch it all out, reaching your legs out long, letting your arms splay out to the side, tucking your shoulder blades under, finding that place of stillness, closing your eyes, and just let go. God, I thank you that you are a God of resurrection life. I thank you that you care about our growth and our healing and our wholeness more than we do. I thank you that nothing is lost with you, that you are the redeemer of time, of relationships, of dreams, of seasons that we thought were lost. God, and I pray that you would give us the courage to believe in that resurrection life, and the courage to accept it, whatever it looks like. God, I pray that you comfort those of us who are grieving things that have died. May we just know greater intimacy with you as we go through that grieving process. May we know your presence. May we know your comfort. I thank you that you sent Jesus, your Son, who was fully man, to walk this human life with us, so that we know that we have an advocator in heaven who understands completely what this life is all about. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Father. Amen. It was such a joy practicing with you today, friends. Stay here as long as you like, and I will see you back here on your mat soon.